Part 1. Into the Forest. Chapter 6. Catri takes a chance. Ree supervised the bath and tea preparations with annoying authority and general bossiness. He hopped onto the table as I prepared the tea. I reached for the rosehip to crush it and add to the pot of boiling water on the stove. Ree grabbed my ungloved hand. "No, Maisie. You were doing so well before. Don't touch any part of the rose with your bare skin. Use the gloves at all times. We don't want to drain the meager magic that's left." Catri watched me stop suddenly. "Is Ree talking? What's he saying?" I explained. Catri nodded. "Ree's right, Maze. Listen to him. The rose has wilted even more since we started making the preparations and drawing the bathwater." Her voice was thin and reedy, with the tremble of an old woman, but I thought I heard an undercurrent of excitement. As I bent over, Ree leaned in so only I could hear, even though Catri never heard him. "And we can't risk further exposure to the potential dark magic to you." He bounded off and dragged a glove across the table to me. For someone so small, he was amazingly quick and strong. "Yes. Sorry. You're both right. It just slipped my mind." I pulled the gloves on and put the dried rosehip in the mortar, grabbing the pestle. It was going to be awkward working with gloves. "I'm good now, Ree. I can handle it from here. I've made rosehip tea many times." Ree cocked one eyebrow. "But have you ever made magical rosehip tea?" I sighed as I reached for some dried mint to add a little extra flavor to the tea the way Mother always had. "Is there a difference?" He rolled his eyes. "Shows what you know of magic. Is there a difference?" He made one of his wild gesticulations, indicating his frustration with me. "You must add nothing to it, no mint. Put that away. No honey. Nothing to sweeten the tea." "Okay, so I didn't know that." I set the mint aside. "I would have thought we'd want to sweeten the magic to override any darkness." I apologized to Catri. "Ree says you have to drink the tea plain, without mint or honey. Nothing but rosehip and water." Catri didn't object. Ree watched closely, getting in my way, to be honest, as I ground the rosehip and poured it into the boiling water. Then he kept meticulous time, shouting at me to take the pot off the moment he decided it had steeped long enough. "Sieve it. Sieve it now. Into the cup. Make sure there are no rose bits in the cup, and don't let any of them drop or touch you. There. Good." I set the steaming cup on the table. "It's time for me to help Catri disrobe and get into the tub. And time for you to disappear and allow her some modesty." Yes. But first, we must put the rose petals into the tub." I picked up the bowl. "This is important. Dump them in all at once. Then give Catri a sip of tea before you help her into the tub. With luck, it will begin healing immediately and help with her stiffness as well as ease her into her magical transformation. She's to drink the rest of the tea while she bathes. She must drink every last drop. And it's critical she get every part of her body wet, even her hair. Anything left untouched will stay unchanged." My imagination ran wild with images. I shuddered at the thought of the grotesque sight of a beautiful young Catri with one ugly old cheek marring her youthful face. Or her having one withered hand. I explained to Catri. "I'm grateful to Ree for his advice and help. Tell him, will you?" she implored. "He can hear you." I glanced at Ree, who was clearly full of himself, puffed up by the praise. "He looks well enough pleased with himself, believe me." He grinned. "When you're magnificent, you're magnificent. There's no denying it." "You can leave now," I said to him. He shook his finger at me. "Don't dispose of the used tea or bathwater without me. I have to show you how to do it properly. And no soap in the bath. Add nothing. No perfume. No salts. No oils. Nothing." As if we had any of that, other than a cake of homemade soap. Got it. When the water goes cold, get her out. It will do no good for her to sit forever in the cold water, except to catch her death. He waited for me to promise, before he hopped into the kitchen chair, from there to the floor, and slipped out of the kitchen as if disappearing into thin air. I forgot all about him, as I gave Catri a sip of tea, helped her out of her clothes and into the tub. Lately, it hadn't been easy for her to lower herself into the tub. She needed my help to fold her stiff body into the small, low space. But today she slipped in with surprising ease. Careful not to get any water on myself, I wedged a towel against the back of the metal tub for her to lean against. She looked up at me. Did you see that, Maze? Did you see me lower down without groaning? I think it's working. It's working already. I wanted it to work as much as she did, but I was trying not to let my hopes fly beyond my control. The despair, if they were dashed, would be more than I could bear. Ree says you have to get every inch of yourself wet, including your hair. But he warned me not to let a drop touch me. The magic must all be for you. Can you get your hair wet? I handed her a pitcher. I watched as she moved slowly, but with relative ease compared to her fragile movements lately. When she doused herself thoroughly, I handed her the cup of tea. As she soaked in the tub, relaxing in front of the fire, my stomach growled. Catri had saved me a bowl of cold porridge. Now would be my chance to eat it. But my spoon was missing, and the last of the cream was gone. Ree. I found my spoon beneath the cushion of our one good upholstered chair. Ree just couldn't help himself. But he was being a little obvious, wasn't he? There was no way I'd mislaid the spoon in the chair, or that it had somehow dropped beneath the cushion accidentally. Fine. You're letting me know you're still a house fae from the south. As I headed toward the table with my spoon, Catri called to me. Maisie, could you close the door? It's come open. A cold breeze is coming in. I rushed to shut it, muttering unflattering things about Ree as I did. He couldn't do something good without ruining his reputation and making up for it by pulling a prank. Catri soaked in the tub until the water was cold and the tea was gone. It was heartbreaking to watch her stare at her wrinkled hands and body, hoping and hoping, looking for the slightest change. But I was no different. I was watching closely and nervously too. It's working. She studied her hands. My age spots look lighter. I know they do. And there are fewer of them. She held up her hands for me to see. What about my face? Do I look younger to you? She lengthened her neck and turned her cheek to me, a trick she used to lessen her wrinkles. Less wrinkled? I think you've been in the water so long that you have prune wrinkles now. I tried to sound light. But the truth was, how honest should I be with her? She looked a little younger, I thought. If I squinted. But not young. Not her true age. Hand me mother's mirror. I want to see. You can look in the mirror when you're out of the bath. There's no need to rush things. She paused as if getting up the courage to speak. How long did it take for your hand to heal? Be honest, Maisie. I need the truth. I don't know exactly. Which was the honest truth? It was still injured in the forest when I put my glove on to carry the rose. I had a hard time getting the glove on over my swollen fingers and palm. And it hurt horribly. I paused, wondering how much to reveal. You saw what my hand looked like when I took the glove off here. That's how long it took to heal. The problem is, I have no idea how long it took me to get out of the forest. Time seemed to move differently there. That's my impression anyway. But did you feel it healing? I shook my head. I was distracted with fear and survival, and coursing with adrenaline. I was honestly stunned to find my hand like this. I wiggled the fingers of my newly beautiful hand. Catri hung on my words, clinging on to hope at the same time. The rose was fresh then, newly cut. More potent. And still it took time. We need to give this time. It has to heal my whole body." "I agree." As she nodded, a dark streak appeared in her previously white hair. I jumped out of my chair. "Catri, your hair is getting its color back. You have a dark streak." I pointed. She clapped like a delighted child and grabbed the hair that I'd pointed out. I knew it was working. "Now that we're sure of it, let's get you out of there." I grabbed a towel and helped her out of the tub, carefully avoiding getting dripped on. She moved with more ease now. She looked a few decades younger than when she'd gone into the tub. As she toweled off, we both examined her in awe and wonder and utter delight. Her skin was less paper-thin and softer. Her veins less prominent. She had fewer age spots, and her hair had gone from pure white to gray with streaks of its original dark brown. I tried to help her dress, but she pushed me away and headed to the cracked full-length mirror on the opposite wall. She preened in front of it, inspecting herself from head to toe, even peering over her shoulder at her backside. Her eyes were wide with excitement. "I feel better. I look better. Younger. It's working. It's working, Maisie." She impulsively hugged me, more tightly than she had in months. "By tonight, I'll be young and beautiful again." She did a stiff little dance. I was optimistic, but more cautious. And although she may have forgotten about the potential consequences of using the rose's power, I was still watching for effects of dark magic with a cautious eye. "You'd better get dressed." I held her undergarments out to her. "Let me help you." "I don't need help now, Maisie. I'm going to be well. I'm going to be beautiful. More beautiful than before. More beautiful than ever. Let's not get ahead of ourselves." I bit my lip, watching her anxiously. "How are you feeling?" "Fine. Perfectly fine. Totally lovely." She danced around the room, moving not exactly youthfully, but at least she was moving without pain. "Let's celebrate. Let's break into our stores and bake something luscious and delicious. Let's eat some of the dried berries. Cook them in a pie. Let's not get carried away." But I couldn't help smiling. She hadn't been this energetic in months. She stuck her tongue out at me, playfully. I hadn't seen her do that in ages, either. It was a girlish gesture in an older, mature body, but I was encouraged to see her youthful spirit returning. She tucked her hair behind her one ear and pulled her hair back from the other side of her head, revealing the misshapen stub of an ear she'd been born with. Am I growing a second ear yet? Is my one ear beautiful? She danced to the mirror to look. Catri's beauty mark since birth had been her stub of an ear. It sometimes affected her hearing, particularly on that side. But it was an easy beauty mark to hide. She simply covered it with her thick hair. We often joked that only having one ear was the reason she couldn't hear Ree. The more severe beauty mark of the aging sickness hadn't appeared until she was 11 or 12. Poor mother. She had blamed herself for it, even though neither she nor Catri's father had suffered from it. So how could they have passed it on? Even so, it had horrified Mother. And her horror of it seemed to go further than her sorrow that her child was sick and would most likely die before her time. "You just looked a minute ago," I said, humoring Catri. "Can you hear me any better?" She shrugged. "There's your answer. You still have one regular-looking ear and one stub of an ear. I don't even know what a beautiful ear would look like." She inspected her ear. "You'd know when you saw it. It will come." As she admired the dark streak in her hair, Ree reappeared, sneaking up on us like always. His timing was so impeccable, I got the feeling he hadn't been far away. Probably not out of earshot. He put his hands on his hips and studied Catri. "She's looking better. A little younger." He frowned. She used to admire herself like that when she was small. Before she got sick. I thought she had outgrown it. "Let her have her fun. Let her enjoy this," I whispered to him. You'd be admiring yourself too, if you suddenly looked younger." He looked at me aghast. "Why would I want to look younger? I'm perfect as is. I'm at my prime." He puffed out his chest. I laughed. He was a vain little creature. But since he'd come from the South, it was hard to blame him for what his culture had trained into him. Catri spun around. "What are you laughing at? Is Ree back?" "He is." "And what does he say about me? Does he notice the difference?" I hedged, not wanting to add height to her already elevated hopes. "He says you look a little younger." "A little? I'm decades younger." She shook her finger at open air where she assumed Ree to be, judging from where I'd been looking a moment before. But he'd moved to another spot. "You should learn to flatter and compliment ladies better." Ree rolled his eyes and bounded over to the cold bath. "I need no lessons. I flatter perfectly but not falsely. Enough of this. We have work to do, Maisie." Under Ree's instruction, I managed to scoop the rose petals from the bath and set them by the fire to dry alongside the remains of the crushed rosehip. Then I dragged the tub outside and emptied it as far from the croft as I could drag it, which was much farther than I thought possible. I imagined Ree had something to do with my surprising strength. And I didn't get a drop on myself either. Magical. I usually didn't have much luck not getting soaked by the bathwater. By the time I finished, the transformation was taking its toll on Catri's energy. Even her excitement couldn't fend off the sudden onset of fatigue. "Go get your beauty rest," I teased and sent her to rest in the bedroom she'd shared with Mother on the main floor. She didn't fight me on it. When I wake up, I'll be young and beautiful. Anything to help the process along. While she rested, I did the dishes, then wrapped the stem, dried petals, and crushed rose hips in a scrap of old cheesecloth. All the while, I was thinking about what to do with the rose. What was the best plan? Who did I have to fear the most? Who had the most to gain from the rose? The problem was that everyone seemed to have the most to gain. Even if they didn't want the rose for themselves, selling it to the highest bidder would set a poor soul up for life. However, other people had a lot to lose. Like the Earl, who was now poised to have his daughter chosen as our selectress. Did that make him more dangerous than the rest? He was certainly the most powerful person in the area. Would I soon find his troops on our doorstep? Before I'd gone into the forest, none of this had crossed my mind. I'd been blinded with desperation. Single of mind on healing Catri. In our little village, the Earl was the highest-ranking noble. We weren't consequential enough to have a duke. The duke lived in the largest town in our province and rarely bothered with us. The duke had no marriageable daughters. Not even a niece or cousin to offer up. He had a bigger army than the Earl. He could crush him in a moment, if he chose. Even if the Earl's daughter became selectress, we all knew she would never be queen. Which meant the Earl wouldn't be any more of a threat to the Duke than he already was. I had to get rid of the rose in such a way that the Earl understood we were no threat to him, and so that everyone else quickly found out that we no longer had it. We needed the Earl's protection. But how to get it without endangering Catri's life? My brain was thick with fatigue. Only fear and adrenaline were keeping me going. I needed to think, but I felt like I was thinking through thick fog. "Now we implement your plan." Ree rubbed his hands together and looked at me expectantly. "I thought we implemented your instinct. You're the mistress of this house. I'm only the humble servant." If I hadn't been so tired, I would have laughed. Since when had Ree ever been humble? Or a servant? Fatigue was fast catching up with me. I was so tired that I could have fallen asleep on my feet. I leaned against the table. My head bobbed. I'm back in the glen, the rose tantalizingly in front of me. Black, odorless smoke curls around me, seemingly rising from the forest floor. But there's no fire, no light producing it. Black wings sparkle menacingly over me. Eyes as dark and fearsome as death stare at me. The mouth of the feared Dorka curls into a fashion of a smile. Sleep, little girl, sleep. Let me take you to my queen. Hey, sleeping beauty? Ree clapped sharply in my ear. Did I wake you? Sorry. I jerked awake, startled, and gasped as if breathing in life. But I'd meant to scream. It had simply frozen in midair. Ree's face was white and his expression sharp as he watched me. You're pale as ash and twice as gray. What did you see? I took a deep breath and tried to steady my shaking hands. I didn't want to remember. The Glen. The feared Dorka. He was coming for me. Ree looked grim. Black magic is on the loose. You got too close to the feared Dorka. No one escapes an encounter with him without consequences. I wondered how Ree could possibly know such things. He shook his finger at me. Fall asleep again before the dark poison in you recedes and you won't wake up again. He was such a funny little thing. I tried to ignore his dire prediction and headed for the one good upholstered chair in our one main room. I just needed to sit a minute and mull through the various ideas I had for getting rid of the rose. Each of them seemed to have a flaw. Ree beat me to the chair, stationing himself in the middle of the seat cushion where I couldn't avoid sitting on him. Oh no, you don't. It's not safe for you to sleep yet. We go to town. I stifled a yawn. No. We go to see the Earl. My mouth seemed to have decided for me. It engaged before my brain could stop it. Maybe it was protecting me. Lord Fanger. Ree studied me with narrowed eyes, but he looked relieved that I wasn't insisting on a nap. Why? You can't possibly trust him. I'm surprised you didn't encounter his men in the forest or in the fields between the forest and home. It's an open secret that he wants that rose to protect his daughter's chance at the king. Ree made a valid enough point, but I had few options. I think it better that we should go to town and destroy the rose in the town square, where everyone can see, Ree said. I thought of that, but 1, will people believe that we've really destroyed the entire thing? And 2, destroying it will only anger people who will think I should have given them a chance with the rose, no matter what dangers it poses. Still, others will want an explanation of how I came to have it, and why I haven't used it for beauty. For myself or Catri. They may even demand to see Catri, to make sure I haven't used it. We can't afford that. Not yet. And lastly, I don't want to explain about the Darkling to a crowd. I shuddered. I was no lover of speaking publicly, and had no experience to allay the fear of it. Who knows how they'll react? Fear drives people to cruelty too often to trust. I don't need a mob to deal with too. I took a deep breath to clear my head. I won't risk running afoul of either the people or the authorities. We still have to live here after all. We draw enough ridicule and suspicion as it is. Let the lord of the region shoulder the responsibility of the rose, and any consequences be on him. I'm going to do what any honorable person would do. Turn the remains of the potentially dangerous rose over to the most powerful authority in the region. He'll use it for his own gain, Ree cautioned. Then let him. I don't care. I'll warn him fairly. I've gotten what I wanted from it, as much as can be expected anyway. Besides, you said yourself that the rose has little to no magic left. What harm can it really do? Ree appeared to mull over my plan, while he sat comfortably in my chair. What about getting the word out? You needn't worry about that. As soon as his servants see I've come for an audience with him, and what I've brought, word will spread. Like Mother always said, servants and tradesmen are notorious gossips. If you want to spread a rumor, start with them. If I'm lucky, the good Lord himself will even send out a proclamation. Lord Fanger's only daughter is generally considered the most beautiful, least beauty-marked girl of the province. The villagers are placing bets that she'll be the king's emissary's choice. She has the right pedigree too. But then you know that, Sorella. I smiled slyly. Very perceptive, Ree. Lady Brinley is very beautiful, and her beauty mark barely noticeable. She has no pressing need of the rose. But my giving it to her father anyway should keep us in the Lord's good graces. He has the power to destroy the rose's remains without public censure or fear of reprisal. He's surely smart enough, cautious enough, even ruthless enough, not to risk using any remaining trace of dark magic on his beloved daughter, his hope for more glory and power. He might even be grateful that the rose won't be able to produce competition for her, and reward us accordingly. Ree's eyes sparkled. You're a wily one, my Maisie. I have taught you well. You've taught me. I looked at him in amazement. I thought up the plan. Yes, but I made you think on it. He tapped his chest. I'll get my cloak. There was no use arguing with him. But I hesitated in front of the peg that held my cloak. What about Catri? I bit my lip. It's not wise to take her with us just yet. It's not likely, unfortunately, but if she suddenly transforms into a beauty rivaling Lady Brinley. Yes, Sorella. That's the way to think. She stays here and barricades herself in. It's important that no one sees yet that the rose has helped her. That will only make a thief more determined. Until everyone knows that we no longer have the rose, she's not safe. She may not be safe even then, I thought grimly. I had to convince the Earl she was no threat. Tell her not to open the door for anyone. Ree began gesticulating wildly, like he did when he was excited. Not even if they sound and look like us. You mean like me? She can't see you. Whatever. She must stay out of sight and be brave. If the house is barricaded, how will we get back in? I asked logically enough. Leave that to me. I sighed. Ree wasn't the most reliable, but he'd proven trustworthy enough these past hours. I had no other choice. I heard Catri stirring in her bedroom. I tapped gently on her door, and slipped inside to relate the plan and pass along Ree's instructions and strict warning to her. Not even to you, she asked as I had. To no one. He's afraid someone might impersonate us and harm you, even though you no longer have the rose. I was thinking of a witch or a fae in the employ of a human who wanted the rose. You have magic on the brain. Ree had somehow silently followed me in and listened in. But also, I fear someone may try to take us hostage and use us to gain access to the cottage. That's reassuring, I whispered to him, wishing he weren't always so frank. But we'll have what's left of the rose on us. If it comes to that, we'll hand it over. Ree shook his head. Will we? What if they take us when we're on our way home, after having visited the Earl? We'll be empty-handed then. Will they believe us? He waited for me to praise his thinking. I bit my lip. We'll ask for a receipt from the Earl. That will be our proof to anyone who questions us. We'll get his seal. No one will doubt that. Ree shook his head. I'm not convinced of this plan. We can't risk dark magic falling into the wrong hands, even if the chance of it is remote. Can we trust the Earl to not let that happen? No one would dare go against the Earl. You think too small, Sorella. No human, maybe. But believe me, even though Morel is afraid of the rose, there are others much more powerful than her who will want it precisely because it may contain dark magic. We must convince the Earl to destroy the rose for us. I went cold. I have no influence over an Earl. As I said, let the consequences be on him. Destroying the rose is in his best interest. Catri sat up in bed. Is Ree in the room? Tell him it's not polite to visit a lady's bedchamber without her invitation. She laughed. She had carried Mother's hand mirror into bed with her. She picked it up and took another look at herself, and with a smile that should have warmed my heart, crossed her heart. Go. Go to the Earl. I won't let anyone in. I promise. No one, Maze. Least of all you. She laughed. But I looked out her bedroom window at the Doove and shuddered. I could feel it watching us.